Welcome to the Friends of Dan Music Podcast. I'm Dan Miles. That was a track called Sunset Drive from a 1979 Jean-Luc Ponty album called A Taste for Passion, featuring the fine guitar work of Jamie Glaser, who was my guest on the last episode of the show. We scheduled that interview for 9 o'clock a.m., Jamie's time in Utah. He said he had to be finished by noon, so we joked that we shouldn't need more than about 2 hours and 45 minutes of his time, because obviously there was no way we'd be going that long. Well, 3 hours and 15 minutes later, we were still talking away, and honestly, I suspect we could have talked for another 3 hours. So needless to say, we ended up with more than enough content to make a show out of. On our last episode, you heard quite a lot of it, but there were also several tangents we went down that would have been a bit too much to squeeze into the first show, but given their entertainment value, we didn't want all that material going to waste. So we're going to be sharing it with you right now in this encore bonus episode. The first story we'll hear involves the details of how Jamie became a member of Anderson Ponty. So let's listen to that.
I don't know if you're familiar with how this band started with the other guitar player, Jamie Dunlap.
I've seen the DVD that he's in, but you're playing. So and the clever editing, whenever a guitar solo comes on, there bright lights or a little animation because it's actually your guitar. Was it just poorly recorded? Was that the problem?
Yes. Well, there was quite a bit of stuff that's going on. I'll be honest with you. When this first came down, I started to get letters on social media. I'm very active on social media, as you may know, and people were writing, "Congratulations, so great that you're going to be touring it," because I had left touring on purpose. In 1994, I was with Manhattan Transfer, and I decided that I wanted to make a living composing for television. And I already had quite a few animals, which we may talk about later, and I just felt like it was time to get off the road, you know. I was already doing studio work for 20 years, and there's a comfort level there and a success, especially after Seinfeld and other shows. And I just didn't see the need to go to an airport every day and break my life up to leave and all that, the rest of it. So when I got this announcement from everybody, "Hey, Jamie, it's great that you're playing with Jean-Luc and John Anderson. Oh, that's amazing." And I had to write them back, "I have no idea what you're talking about." and I did, and suddenly I said, "Well, I better inspect this, because if I'm in the band, I probably should know." I mean, I really thought that, you know. And I find that the guitar player they're using is a guy named Jamie Dunlap, talented composer. He's known mostly for writing the theme for South Park.
Okay.
And some other Disney things. He's a real good guitarist, rock guitarist especially. He sings. And so Jamie Dunlap did that particular show, which was, I guess it was just a concept, an idea. They had no plan before. They went to Aspen and got together for 8 hours a day for 3 weeks, all in an effort to make a record, a live DVD and a CD. So they did the show, and yes, the guitar was bleeding into stuff, or things were bleeding into the guitar track. Stuff was poorly recorded, and mostly Jamie could not tour. His commitment to Disney was giant. I don't think that they even had time to discuss that, you know, that possibility. So there was, I was not there, but from what I understand, there were a couple of ideas. The band was actually started by a guy in Nashville, the concept. Won't get into all of that. But they considered him and a couple other people. And then I guess Jean-Luc suggested that John look through some videos of the old band. And so, to my delight, Dan, John Anderson is the one who chose me. Jean-Luc didn't have, I'm sure he had a say. I mean, he wrote me an email that, you know, he told them that we get along great. We've played the things you had said. We did albums. But that was delightful to hear, because I always pictured John as Mr. Prog. I have suddenly become a prog musician, you know. It's the way you're branded. Get letters every day, you know. I was into Yes and Genesis and Gentle Giant and blah, blah, blah. And where were you, you know? And I have to explain.
Originally, people thought you got the gig just because the guy who did get it, his first name was Jamie, and they didn't really read past that. If the guy's name would have been like Bob or something, you probably wouldn't have got those messages.
I would not have gotten it. And the thing was that I'm always honest, you know. When I found out it was Baron Brown, Rayford Griffin, Wally Minko, and Jean-Luc,
Had to be you.
I was jealous as heck. I mean, and kind of insecure. I was like, well, why didn't they have me for this?
Yeah.
Particularly since it was a brand new vision. And John Anderson, I was like, wow, that would be great to play with John. If I'm going to come out of retirement, this would be a great thing, you know, for my life, for my bio, for my business, for everything. And the joy of course, playing and learning from John Anderson.
All upside, man.
Know, I was here with my fiance, and I was saying, you know, I don't get it. I don't get it. I was always friendly with these guys. But she reminded me that Jean-Luc had changed the band over and over and over. I mean, we would do an album, and suddenly another album came out, and it was Frank Gambale or Alan Holsworth or whoever, and then I'd get another call for the next record. He switched bands due to the attitude and vision he had for each band, for each album. So I'm proud to say that I lasted the longest with him. I'm not sure why.
Well, in addition to your expected guitar work, as you alluded to, you also did some supplementary keyboard parts and a pretty fair amount of backing vocals. Did you ever have to do any vocals on the previous Ponty tours, or was it always just instrumental?
No. Well, we tried. There was an album which had a song called As. It was a Stevie Wonder song, you know. I have my guitar for the listeners. Right? And we all tried singing it. And what was happening in those days was we were selling gold, 400,000 records. I mean, it was incredible what was going on. Before I got on the band, I understand Aerosmith opened for Jean-Luc, but we had Bonnie Raitt and Renaissance and all kinds of groups, Little River Band opening for us. We were almost somehow ended up in the pop world with Jean-Luc, which was an amazing experience. And then we played for 100,000 people a night with Supertramp. So things were pretty crazy back then. We had everything the rock stars did except, you know, certain things. And we had the limos, and we were doing sometimes 2 countries in one day with a private plane going from Greenland to Sweden. It was incredible. Even though I've done music with Bryan Adams and other rock stars, I didn't tour with them when they were, you know, in that mode. So I got a taste of that. So what happened was the Brecker Brothers and a couple of other Brand X, a couple of other bands started to do vocals on their album to increase sales, to increase their audience, their following. And so Ahmet Ertegun and other people, I guess they hired Dave Grusin to produce us, and they wanted us to do vocals. And Jean-Luc was completely adamantly against it. He didn't write lyrics. His daughter, Clara, who was a lyricist, was only 9 years old then. So he refused. He refused the label. And they came down really heavy. And of course, I'm a sideman, so I don't know his contracts or his business. But at some point, he walked in and he says, okay, we have to try this. We'll give them one single. And we came up with the Stevie Wonder song. And we all tried singing it. And and we did it in the studio in Burbank, and he was completely unhappy with this. I don't think any of us, Rayford was really the singer. I mean, I was using Rayford on my demos for songwriting demos, a wonderful singer. I sang like a baby Bruce Springsteen, pretty much a rock singer, doing backgrounds, and wasn't strong enough. I was not strong enough, you know. And so you could tell he was getting really unhappy. He didn't want to do this in the first place. And then nobody in his band, and he surely was not going to sing. No. You know, that's not him. So someone brought in I don't know if it was Grusin or somebody else, brought in a vocoder. And he was already into the synclavier and all kinds of new synthesizers. So we figured this is cool. You know, we all tried to sing. And it turned out Rayford ended up the vocalist. All vocoder, no natural voice whatsoever on there. And it was just the chorus. So, of course, after the record was released, we started to do television. Don Kirshner's rock concert, Midnight Special, The Tonight Show, on and on. We had a lot of TV performances. Yeah, you know how they do. I don't know, they don't do it as much now. Morning news, or they catch you to sound check. And we get to Solid Gold. You're too young to probably know that.
Oh no, Solid Gold Dancers. I remember all that.
Okay, good, cool. So it was a big show, and Marilyn McCoo was there, and a whole bit. And the show chose that we'd record as we would perform as. Well, this presented a few issues. For one, we're going to lip sync, which was not something a jazz rock fusion band did. They told us we could not play live, and we heard about this the day before.
Oh, wow.
So now we show up, and Jean-Luc calls me, and he was living in L.A. He says, you and I have to memorize our solos. And later on, maybe I'll talk more about that. But for now, I have never memorized a solo. That's rock and roll bands do that, and I improvised every time. We didn't even play a hook from what the records had, you know?
Right.
And so, and it's funny because I've been searching for this video, Dan. I completely screwed it up. I mean, there was a lick like something, and I was down here on the guitar. Well, nobody can see this. I was at the first fret, and it was pretty funny, I guess. It wasn't funny to me when I saw it on television, but 30 years later, it's kind of funny what happened. Anyway, we get finished with the Solid Gold, and we get into the van to go back to the hotel, and Jean-Luc announces that we will never, ever perform it again.
Yeah.
And so that we started our tour maybe a week and a half later. We never played it again, ever.
Wow. Well, funny, As is the first song I ever heard on Songs in the Key of Life when that album came out, the Stevie version. I go, wow, I got to get this album. Then I get the album, and it just, blows my mind. And I remember I got the track you're talking about, and basically what ended up happening is his violin covers the melody. And as you say, now yes. I know why those vocoder vocals come in. I hadn't planned to do this, but I actually want to pause right now because we talked so much about it. Let's play that track.
Great, thank you.
Jean-Luc Ponty's As.
I'm a big fan of Paul McCartney. I don't really go to see live music because I'm a producer and composer. I'm always either working on some client's thing, I'm hearing music all the time, but I don't have a chance to go to concerts. But I am a freak for Paul McCartney for some reason. Seen him in Madison Square Garden a couple of times a year. And what started to happen, especially the last decade, were the people my age were bringing their sons and daughters, and they were bringing their grandchildren. And indeed, some of their greatest fans for Paul are these young kids, right? And as our tour started, it was mostly the Geritol group.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you a funny story in a second about that. But as the tour progressed, we started to see people bringing their grandchildren, their children, and they were clamoring for autographs and screaming. And it was a giant, delicious experience, to be honest with you. And when we did this tour, we didn't know. In the 80s, all of us in the band were single, except for Jean-Luc. And we thought we were rock stars, so we did what rock stars do, and we went out to meet women and other stuff a lot. And we had it was just like any rock band. We had systems in place. I had a guitar tech who was amazing. And I would say, well, you see that, he'd come over to make it look like I needed help with my guitar. And I'd say, you see that girl in the 7th row? See if you can bring him back after the show. I mean, it was all that kind of stuff going on, rock star and the craziness. And so anyway, we get finished with the first show in Philadelphia, and kind of nobody said anything to each other. And I think it was Wally that said, what happened to our audience? And suddenly, all of us, Keith, Rayford, all of us, we all knew exactly what he was talking about, because there was nobody out there, at that particular show, younger than 60 or 50. It was just like someone took the shot and then substituted the audience for another kind of audience. And we, of course, we're musicians, we're guys. We don't think we age at all. We think we're still 20.